Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Story Coaching Podcast. This is episode 11, and today we're going to go a little bit more tactical again. I know the last couple weeks have been more sort of mindset, big picture stuff, but today I want to talk about creating subplots. So you may have heard that a subplot is something that you need in your story. And really what a subplot is a secondary story, and you can have um, multiple storylines that are running parallel to your main story. And really what you're doing is you're adding depth, you're adding information, you're enriching the characters, you're enriching the world and the experience. um, you know common subplots that we might think about are like the romantic subplot. So characters going out there saving the world, and there's a little romance subplot on the side. Or sometimes it's just personal goals. It's something that someone wanted before the adventure began, and they want it badly enough that they're still continuing to pursue that adventure, or that goal while they're on the adventure. Or maybe it's family tension type stuff. Maybe it's, a mom and sister who are overbearing while this poor character is also trying to deal with the adventure. It really is about, and also it's a the main storyline, but then also this and also this and also this and all of these complicating factors. It mimics our real life, right? It's not like we get to have, as people, we don't get to have one goal, one thing that we're working towards, and everything else stays quiet and calm. Oftentimes there are multiple things that we're thinking about in the day. And so the question is, should you have a subplot? And the answer is heck yes. Goodness. Yes, you should. And often multiple. And you might have heard, especially if you've studied any like screenwriting, the A and B stories are always going to intertwine. So your main plot, your A story, and your B plot, which some people would call a subplot. For me, it's the main other plot. You're always going to have these two stories intertwine, and you might have, C, D, E, F. You might have the whole alphabet of extra subplots happening, and all of those are going to intertwine and makes for this really robust, exciting, everything coming together serendipitously novel, where really what's happening is something that's happening in some event or some piece of information learned in a subplot is going to help the character overcome the main story problem. And that's so important, just to keep everything knitting together. And some people will ask, do I have to? do I have to put a story together with subplots? Do I have to have all these extra pieces? They just want to write the main story. They just need to make it straightforward. They just need to get the character from the beginning to the end. And it can feel really complicated to keep track of multiple storylines. Or it can feel like, it can take so much work just to think of one story and how that's all going to fit together, that how in the world are you going to put together multiple storylines? It's going to be too complicated. How are you going to think of all of that? It just can feel, I think, really overwhelming. And the truth is that some stories don't have subplots. So, like picture books for kids, often there's not enough room to have a subplot. It's just a very straightforward this. Or sometimes like purely action novels or movies, you won't really see more than, I can't really think of any that just have one subplot, but usually like two. There's like the action, will he or won't he save the world, with the secondary subplot of won't he get the girl. So some of these stories might only have 2 or 3 plots. They don't have to have a dozen, like some novels do, and some novels are out there with very basic structures that have just a handful of subplots. But in my experience, this is not really what most readers want. They don't want a story that's necessarily super straightforward, because it becomes easy to predict. It becomes easy to say, oh, well, obviously they're going to this and this and this, and that will be how the whole thing goes together. My husband is actually the worst for that. He can predict the ending of action movies usually within like 10 minutes of starting. So it's really frustrating for me to watch movies with him. Um, but yeah, so subplots, and I think the reason why readers really connect to subplots is because they're adding depth. They're adding more interest to the story and to the character. So one thing that they do is oftentimes the subplot will mirror the main conflict and will give us a different perspective. So you might have a situation where one character's having a conflict with another character. Maybe that's the main conflict, but one of the subplots is that they're having an opposite conflict with another character, and so they're starting to see the perspective from both sides. We also find that subplots can be there to complicate the main character or the main conflict, and often what they're doing is they're adding in clashing values and goals. And we know that tension comes from when a character is struggling between two different values. They're trying to decide which one is more important to them, which will then, force them to make a choice. When we have subplots, all of a sudden we've not only got the will he won't he save the world, but we've got his grandma is sick, his child is missing, he's got all of these other problems, and he needs to try to figure out how he's going to solve all of them or make the least bad choice and try to figure out, does he want to save his dying grandmother or does he want to find his child? He has to make the least bad choice, and that's where these subplots can really come in, is providing more a more robust understanding of the values and goals, and really driving up that internal tension, because now, same as a regular person going through day-to-day life, now our character has so much going on that they need to try to keep track of. And the last thing that subplots can really be handy for is it just gives something else for them to be doing while things are happening off screen for the main plot. So maybe they think that they've solved whatever problem, and we need a day or two for the villain to recoup and launch a whole new dastardly plan, or we need something to distract the reader, to give the reader a sense of resolution or low tension so that we're getting that emotional up and down. Sometimes we need a subplot that's a little bit lighter. That's why romantic subplots work so well in action movies, is because the action is all this like crazy high tension, and the romantic plot is it's also tension, but it's a very different tension, and so it gets that reader, it allows the reader or the watcher, if it's a movie, to kind of breathe a sigh of relief away from the explosion type action and into a much more relaxed internal type action. It gives us that variation that really engages readers so much more. And so when we want to add subplots, so hopefully you're seeing now that we should be adding subplots. How do we add them, and how do we add them easily? So here's my experience. I think the more subplots we have, the more fun to write the book is. And I think it actually makes a book come together much easier, because you have all of these options of where where different clues or different aspects of the solution to the story problem are going to come from. And I'm going to refer you back to episode 7, which was all about character creation, where we're building, robust, deep characters that have multiple goals. So multiple goals equal multiple storylines. There's all of these different things that they're working together. I'm also going to suggest you have another listen to episode 9 on story structure, or download that free story planning guide that has the universal story structure outline in it, where we're really talking about multiple turning points that are happening to keep things fresh and to keep things moving and keep those readers engaged. But those turning points are coming from lots of things going on and a clashing of the internal and external goals, which is what we've been talking about with subplots. So when we go ahead to try to add a subplot, really what we're talking about is another goal. And this goal might be something that the character started with. It might be something that they were working towards before the big adventure kicked in, whatever that is in your genre. So they might still be working towards whatever they're working towards. Or it might be a goal that has come in and is new for them in the adventure world. We can add goals to our character all the time. And when we have a goal, when we ask our character to set a goal or to be pursuing a goal, we do need to recognize that we want at least 3 to 5 different touch points with that throughout the novel. So, for example, we might have the example I was going to give was, we might have a student pursuing their degree who's also in a romance novel. So the adventure would be, she meets the guy. And it occurred to me that was the plot of 50 Shades of Grey, but let's go with it. So we have a student who, they start out and they have this goal of building their, they have this goal of finishing their degree in whatever that is through, an unexpected set of circumstances, i.e. the inciting incident. They meet this new love interest, and then the adventure world or the adventure in this particular romance is about them, coming together and trying to navigate this relationship. So the main story is going to be the relationship, but the subplot is the schooling, the degree. And so we want a handful of touch points on that, where we're seeing, similarly to the big plot, we're seeing different struggles and different tensions that are coming up. And so a lot of it's going to revolve around, she has to study, but she also has to study, but she also wants to hang out with the romantic interest. And we just want to make sure that we're planning a handful of events where these things coincide, 3 to 5. And it might be that they coincide easily. It might be that maybe they don't even really coincide that much, but she's at school, she's doing whatever. Someone comes up to her and starts talking about the romantic interest. Can be just very, very sort of loose touch point like that. Or it can be a really direct sort of conflicting touch point, like, do I study or do I hang out with my man? And that's really, in a nutshell, how you build a subplot. You look at different goals, or you might have a goal that comes up after she meets the romantic interest. After she meets the romantic interest, she witnesses, she develops an intense interest in his hobby, boxing. I don't know, I'm making this up. And there's some type of controversy that she now also wants to solve. We add a mystery element in there, and so now we've got same type of idea. We've got the main story, which is the romance, but we've got this mystery subplot. What happened at the boxing ring? and And we're just creating a couple of touch points where those two stories are going to interact, or even where you really do want them interacting in some way, um, but really just even where the subplot is developing and there's just like a little tie-in with the main plot. And so we've got, again, 3 to 5 sort of um, different steps towards concluding the subplot, whatever that's going to be. So the mystery subplot might be that she discovers it was, so and so has been drug doping. This is not an area that I should be making up subplots in, but so she's got maybe five things where she meets the romantic interest at the boxing ring and is super excited or very interested, and then but while she's there, a little controversy shows up because somebody approaches her and is not very nice or is kind of creepy, whatever. And then there's another one where her romantic interest was injured at the boxing ring and doesn't understand what happened, and so she develops a concern. She's now concerned about this. And then we've got another subplot, point, another plot point where she's back at the boxing ring. She goes late at night and she sees something, but she's not quite sure what she saw. And she goes late at night because she was going to meet the romantic interest there, but he ended up not being there. And she saw something that just seemed really shady. And then a little while later, we have another point where she gets threatened because of what happened or what she saw. And then and then maybe there's this whole like threat subplot you could add in there too. But and then and then she puts all the clues together and solves the mystery and realizes that the creepy guy is the bad guy and whatever, right? So it doesn't have to be complicated, and it can be something kind of ridiculous just off the top of your head like that. But the more that you know about your character, and the more that you know about how they view things, how they value things, how they see the world, and what their goals are, the more easily you're going to be able to build these subplots. And subplots follow, to a certain degree, they follow story structure. They're not going to be as in-depth, but they're still going to have these ups and downs, and they're going to have these turning points. And the turning points are often going to coincide with some of the turning points in your main story. And so that's something that takes a bit of massaging for every story. But that's basically how you do it, and it does get to be this really fun and creative time when you're building this and when you're building your plot. We can also add subplots in while we're writing, and this is frequently when I do them. And I know in the story structure episode, I talked about, sometimes I'll take a detour, and truthfully, yeah, when a new inspiration strikes, a new idea strikes, I will go with it. I'll just follow it along. But I always keep a note, especially if I'm halfway through. So the other week I was writing and I got this like brand new inspiration. But I was getting close to the midpoint, which means that the subplot should also be getting close to the subplot's midpoint. So it was too late to like really introduce something brand new. But what I did is I just went ahead and I put it into the writing like it had always been there. And I was able to, basically I just kept a note. I just put a little note for myself. And I knew that I was going to have to go back in and add different story points for that subplot earlier on. So you can add a subplot before you start writing, and you can add a subplot while you're writing. And the biggest thing is just to make sure that you have those 3 to 5 touch points, depending how important a subplot it's going to be. You might have more touch points as well, and you want to have those touch points be turning points. There are points where someone has either learned new information, or there is a new conflict that's coming up, conflict or crisis that's coming up. Um, really, that's it. Uh, that's really what you want to do with this subplot, and sometimes they're going to have a positive turning point with a subplot, and sometimes they're going to have a negative turning point with the subplot where things are either going to go well or go badly. Um, and at the end of the day, you do always want to make sure that there's a bit of a connection with the main storyline, although the main storyline can be going well while the subplot is going poorly. They don't have to be directly correlated in order to really work. So that is really the deal with subplots, and how to add them in. And odds are you are doing this naturally with your story. But I just want to drive home the idea that I do think good fiction has these subplots, and these subplots are going to affect the main storyline. And these subplots are also going to build your character. They're going to help the character learn whatever they need to learn in order to defeat the main story problem. And it can be quite a big topic to talk about all of these different like storylines and subplots. Part of it's outlined in the story planning guide, which I mentioned earlier and have mentioned a handful of times, so you can download that for free and have a look through that. The other place where we really talk about storylines is in the Right Now program. And that is something also available for you, thewritable.com/rightnow. We do only open up registration twice a year, but you can get on the waiting list to be one of the first to know when we open that up. All right, so that was the subplot of this podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that gives you, it's necessarily vague, but I hope that gives you some ideas going forward of how you too can add subplots pretty easily to your writing, and in a way that's going to enhance your story. All right, so thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week. It's going to be actually our last episode of the season, and we are going to talk about the dreaded writer's block and how to move through that and how to work through that. So I will see you there. Thank you so much.